Hello and welcome to Stamping Cat Crew. Today we're going to make this thank you card. It actually says, "Thank you, your thoughtfulness brightened my day." It uses the Daisy Delight stamp set and then also the Daisy Punch Builder. I know that there's a light shining on, so I'm hoping that you can actually see that. There's the other side, so that's what we're going to show. So super easy. It's a direct-to-paper stamping and then just popped up a couple of the daisy punches. So we're going to start with those first. I'm going to set that aside. I have some scratch paper here that I can use for punching. And this is actually for one of the Creative Cat Crew color challenges. And so the color challenge was Basic Gray, Smoky Slate, Daffodil Delight, and Whisper White. And we can always add like an extra kind of accent color, so we used Pear Pizzazz for the leaves. I'm going to grab my little foam pad here because these are photopolymer stamps, and anytime we're using photopolymer stamps, I like to have a foam pad underneath. It actually has some give because the red rubber has the foam inside. You can get a really nice crisp stamped image. I'm going to stamp 2 of these, and I'll show you why I am placing them the way that I am. So here's the punch. We've stamped 2 of these, and you can see that the petal points down in the punch. So when I stamp my flower with the petal pointing down, it's much easier to punch out your stamped daisy here. And just lining up this second stamped image. And that is it. Let's set the punch aside. We're all done with that. The only thing I did for the center of these is I have our sponge daubers, which I love. And I took some of the Daffodil Delight and just sponged the centers of those. I always tell people don't forget to make your envelopes pretty. So I'm going to set these aside, and because we are using the daisy punch right now, I'm going to grab my envelope and I'm going to set that right here. Get out our basic gray one more time, and this will be the last time we'll use our full daisy punch. And you just want to have the corner of our daisy like that. So you can see here we had a couple of accent daisies, and I am going to do those as well. Just kind of deciding where to angle those. And the final thing we have is the Daffodil Delight, and this is an outline for that daisy, and I'm going to stamp that off twice to just get a real nice pale yellow color. And then take the dauber. And that's it for our envelope. So I'm going to set that aside, so we'll have that. So for the stems, what I did was I used some smoky slate, and I stamped off a couple times. And I also bent the leaf a bit. So if you can see, if I ink this up and stamp this off, because it's a photopolymer, I can give that a curve, and that's what I did. And so I'm going to grab our cardstock for our base now, and because it's direct to paper, the first thing we did is we started with the stems, and I stamped off with those. And because it's on photopolymer, you can see I actually bent the stem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this a little bit sideways. We have our paper like that. And I'm going to ink up the stem, stamp it off, And then you can see our very first one is just about right there. And our second one curves up and around a bit. And our last one really curves down. And then our final stem, and you can see it comes across right about there. And that's going to be covered up, where those come together, they'll be covered up with the daisy. I'm going to set that aside. We are done with our stems. We have our 2 daisies that are punched. And so the next thing I had is the pear pizzazz. I'm going to open that up a little bit. And you can see that the green that I use for the pear pizzazz is very faint. So what I did is I took the sponge dauber and I daubed off and then just barely added a little bit of leaves in the direction that I wanted them to go. And you do want a couple in there that are darker, a couple that are lighter, and that's it. Just enough to add a little bit of contrast on that. The last thing that we're going to do is add our solid daisies and close up the smoky slate, go back to our basic gray. And what I did was added a couple direct to paper. And like that. And I did that full strength for the color. The sentiment that I chose, I wanted a big focal up in the corner. So I'm going to ink up the thank you. And line that up. And anytime that you're using photopolymer or any stamping really, you want to go straight down and straight back up. You don't want to rock your stamp because that will get ink where you don't want it to be on your paper. So add our sentiment on the bottom. So it says, thank you, your thoughtfulness brightened my day. Set both those sentiments aside. The final thing that we had was the yellow inside for the 2. And remember, we really kind of stamped that off. So we stamped off a couple times and then added the yellow. And we're going to stamp off a couple times and add that nice pale yellow. So we are totally done stamping. I'm going to close up the inks so I don't make a mess. We have, this is called a double stitched ribbon, and this one happens to be in the Daffodil Delight. So the first thing I want to do is have enough to go across my card. And I'm going to take my snail adhesive and I'm going to run it around the entire outside. And then this is the piece of the double stitched ribbon that I cut, and I'm going to curve my edges around so that I can attach them to the adhesive that's on the back. And then I always flip my card back over and I add adhesive back on top of where I flip that over. This piece right here that we actually stamped on is cut at 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. In the basic gray, I cut 5 3/8 inches by 4 1/8 inches. Pardon me. It's going to give you a nice border to pop up that white, and then the yellow really brightens everything up. So my card base, I actually did at 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and then we scored and folded it in half at 5 1/2 inches. Use your bone folder on the end to give that a really nice crisp edge, and it makes your paper lay flat. I'm going to flip this over again. We're going to add, again, the snail adhesive around the outside and that. And then we're going to take this and center this, again, getting an even white border around the edges. And then we have our last two daisies here. I flip those over and I'm going to use our full-size dimensionals and put one in the center of each of the daisies. And then what I did the first time I assembled the card is I took a couple, and I knew that it wasn't going to set right exact. So I'm going to eyeball where I want those to be. So I know my first one I want about there. And so I'm going to take that off. And then my second one, I knew I wanted the edges to come to the end of the paper, and it also has to be kind of attached to that bottom stem. And maybe just about there. And then I took each of the petals and I did a little bit of popping them up. You don't want them sticking straight up, but it really adds some depth to your card when you see that. So I'm going to grab the envelope. The final thing that we did, so I'm going to take a length of this. I'm going to tie a knot right here. And then always make your ends look pretty. We're just going to have that pushed over to the left a bit. I'm going to add that. And then trim that end right there. And that's it. So that is for the Daisy Delight stamp set and the Daisy Punch. And that was for a color challenge using Basic Gray, Smoky Slate, and Daffodil Delight. Thanks so much for stopping by. If you have any questions, all dimensions and everything will be on my blog, stampingcatcrew.com. And if you see something you love, you can shop 24/7. Thanks.